So policy risk is something that you hear a lot about, and especially after COVID-19, which we, have, as of this recording, are still in the midst of a rollout of the vaccine and more. Inflation is a conversation a lot of my clients are having. Do you see inflation running amok in the years to come?
I do not see inflation running amok in years to come. Will we see higher inflation? Probably. I mean, that's the goal, right? I mean, it's actually the goal. So when people are like, "Oh, is inflation going to increase?" Well, the Fed's goal is to get inflation higher. Right? It's a stated goal. Now they have stated that jobs are first, inflation second. They're focused on that too. You can argue, right? Going into January, I think we saw core inflation maybe rise above two. Still CPI-based inflation numbers mostly below 2%. And certain and inflation's a funny thing because it's not. It all depends on what metric you want to look at inflation through,
Right.
what lens.
Yeah. Yeah.
CPI, which tracks spending of the elderly, has for about a decade been higher than the CPIW, which is the worker-based one. Why? Because they're spending more money on healthcare. College education inflation was much, much higher. So when you think about parents, their inflation costs actually were going up higher than other things. Now, right, we're recording this on iPhones and computers and TVs. Well, all that stuff is cheaper than it was a decade ago. It's had deflation. Honestly, this year, 2020, what did we see with huge deflation? Oil, gas, I mean, just plummeted in prices. I mean, literally at one point, right, we were down 60 something percent and over a year. Well, that means spending. If I'm traveling or buying oil or gas, that changed my spending. But the thing about inflation is not that meaningful year to year in developed countries. Okay. That's the first part. If you're working, you don't even worry about it that much because generally speaking, wages adjust for inflation. Where inflation becomes really detrimental is not 2021 to 2022. It's 2021 to 2052. Because even if it's 1 or 2% over 30 years, it could still double the cost of goods. That's where it starts to matter. So when you start living on fixed income and then things double, that's where it becomes scary. I do say sometimes too, 32,000%. You might have even heard this in one of the classes. I used this for a while. 32,000%. Do you know what that number relates to from inflation?
No. Tell us all about it.
Yeah. It was the highest single year of inflation in Brazil. So in
All right.
1990, they had 32,000% inflation in 1 year. And I used to joke, right? You'd want to pay for dinner before you eat, not after.
Yeah, I remember this now. Yeah, I remember this. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
you look at like Weimar, Germany, where folks would you'd be carrying a wheelbarrow full of money, and folks would steal your wheelbarrow and leave the money. Yeah, that's kind of the idea
Yep.
there.
Yeah, and so I think this, but what is important about that? It's not to argue that the United States is going to have that type of inflation, right?
Right.
If, and I always tell people, could that happen here? Of course it could happen here, but that means like the entire economy collapsed, and honestly, inflation is the least of your worries at that point because
Right.
it means
Yeah.
nobody's employed, right? You're all unemployed. The inflation numbers,
Yes.
you have, basically chaos in society. So
That's
we
right.
got other
That's right.
concerns.
That's right. Well,
Um,
and just to maybe hopefully help folks find some hope at the end of this episode, one, it's a reminder too that wealth is not just what's in your wallet; it's the assets that all around us provide the productivity of the country. Those airplanes down at O'Hare Airport or nearby your airport, they're still going to be a valuable tool no matter what your dollar is worth. And so, capital is at least a part of the definition of wealth, and that doesn't just they're not going to mothball the airplanes just because someone raised interest rates yesterday, and vice versa. Things like tractors, excavators, sky high, high rises, and more. We have a capital designed society, and that is going to be true no matter what the Fed does or whatever. So I'm with you on that. I'm not losing much sleep over inflation. Um, Jamie, anything else on that before we share with folks some strategies? What you would recommend as the retirement expert?
I love that point you just made. Look, I'm actually a fairly you might not notice it from this, but I'm a fairly like negative or skeptical person on most things. I don't know, skeptical, right? Negative, maybe not the case, but skeptical on most things. However, I'm still very, very bullish on the long-term U.S. economy. Um, we have incredibly well-educated, smart workers with a system of still very strong infrastructure, both technology, IP law, comparatively to most of the world.